Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to another episode here on African Confessions. There is a message that was forwarded to me by one of our admins, and the message reads like this. Dear African Confessions, please post for me and please keep me anonymous. So this story that I am about to share with you, it happened to me back home in Zim. This story, it happened to me whilst I was on my way. I was going to this other interview in Harare. So this interview, for me to be able to attend that interview, I had to arrive in Harare just before 8 a.m. It was very important that I do so, for I needed an emergency passport like yesterday. I had graduated top of my class in my studies, but alas, job opportunities had been slippery like elm. The jobs were hard to come by. If it was not nepotism, well, usually it was your sexual harassment, whereby the recruitment managers had a prerequisite of a carpet interview. Well, let me tell you something about a carpet interview. A carpet interview meant that I had to have sexual intercourse with the HRs. I could not bring myself to do that. In this world was filled with sexually transmitted infections and viruses that were really dangerous and incurable. I had vowed to myself that I would not climb the corporate ladder using my private parts, using my body. 2 years passed after I had graduated with no job prospect in sight. Day in, day out, I sent thousands of applications, but all of those applications that I was sending out, they were to no avail. One day, though the heavens had smiled upon me, God had decided to shine his face upon me. I had gotten used to the rejection emails. I had sent this particular email, this was a few months ago, and when I sent this email, I had forgotten all about it. A virtual interview had been scheduled and he had gotten everything ready. And I had done my research prior to this interview. Well, I was ready to nail this interview and hungry to impress. The money from the side hustles was barely enough to cover my living expenses. And at that time, to be honest with you, I was living from hand to mouth. Well, God's grace was upon my life. I had nailed the interview and I was going to be based in Johannesburg, and I had to report for work. This was on the 1st of April. I had 7 days to prepare for the trip. Just 7 days. I was doable, I assured myself. But first, I had to get an emergency passport, and the only place that they were issuing these passports was in Harare. When the electronic passport was firstly introduced, the pilot program was started in Harare, and meant that I had to travel all the way from Bulawayo, such a long distance, traveling from Bulawayo to Harare just to get this traveling document. I woke up very early to catch the first morning bus. However, as fate would have it, there was a fuel crisis, and the public transport system was in shambles. I was not deterred by this. I would use private transport. Well, I told myself that this was a far much better option. Besides, it will be faster than the public buses, as the driver will not take many bathroom breaks. Well, when I arrived at the taxi rank, it was like a bustle and hustle. People were shouting, vendors were selling whatever they were selling. Then there was this other street tout that shouted. He screamed as he shouted on top of his voice. He was like, Harare, 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 Varkwenda, Harare. It meant that anyone that is headed for Harare, quickly jump into this taxi. Well, I obeyed the screams of his voice. I quickly jumped at the back seat, for I needed to be in Harare as soon as possible. One is enough, the driver said. You can come and sit in the front, the driver said to me. The back is fine, I replied. Besides, I needed to take a nap as I had woken up very early. I did not know this was going to be like a horror story from the movies. A horror story that I was staring in, and it was me who was the main actor. I had the major role in this Hollywood sort of like a horror story. The car was cruising nicely, and the speed was okay for someone who had to arrive so early. Before we reached Shangani, I was dozing. I had the back seat to myself anyway. "Where are we?" I asked the driver. This was when I had woken up from my nap. Then the driver responded, "Oh, we have just passed Kwekwe." The driver smoothly replied. "I had to wake you up," the driver said. "I do not like passengers who sleep. Besides, what is the point of giving a lift to someone to sleep all the way? I prefer someone who keeps me company." "It makes sense," I thought to myself as I lazily stretched myself to sit up straight. It was then when I noticed. I felt my intestines rolling and my stomach turning. I felt nauseous and I wanted to throw up at that very instant. The driver was intently gazing at me through the mirror. At the back of his neck, there were actually maggots. Yes, maggots. It was as if his whole neck area was rotting. I mean that these worms, they were lives. These worms, they were alive. How can a living human being have live worms all over his back area? How is it even possible? I thought it is scientifically impossible or unheard of for a living human being to have maggots. This is only possible when a person is dead and their body starts to decompose. Wait, what? Was the driver dead? Was he a ghost? If he is dead, what is driving the car? But do ghosts even drive? At that very moment, I started having heart palpitations. "Don't worry, sister," the driver said to me. "I have not yet instructed them to attack you yet." "Well, let me tell you a short story, sister," the driver said. "A story that happened to me. Well, as you can see, poverty struck me, my sister, at a very young age, and it showed me no mercy. When poverty struck me at that young age, I struggled with everything from academics to businesses. So one day, a friend of mine told me about this man who made people to get rich very quickly. I got interested, but what I did not know was that I was actually digging my own grave. This man, my sister, he went with me to a witch doctor who gave me some oil, and he told me that this oil, son, that I have given you, I want you to take this oil and rub some of this oil on your neck area. And from that day onwards, I woke up to a bag full of money that I do not have to sweat for. All was well, my sister, until I started losing my closest relatives. I lost all of my relatives one by one. My relatives died up to the point that I started losing my children. One by one, I buried all of them. Well, I have made millions, my sister. I do not know what to do with all of these millions that I have made. Well, when I saw that I was losing all of my relatives and at the same time I was making so much money, I then thought of a plan. I returned back to that witch doctor who told me that this curse that he had placed upon me, it was irreversible. Where I had reached was a point of no return, and I will have to sacrifice strangers. Well, you see, he said, if I do not feed these worms that are crawling all over my back area, these maggots with human flesh and blood, these worms will attack me from the gut and they will kill me instantly. So what happens to me is that every fortnight I have to pick up a random stranger. This random stranger is the one that I am going to feed to these worms. When this man said that usually he sacrifices some strangers that he randomly give a lift, that was when a thought came to my mind. That was why this man had said that one passenger is enough. Well, I started praying in my heart. I said, my death will not be by worms. No, I refuse. I refused as I said, Jesus Christ, my Lord, please save me, Jesus Christ. I must act very fast. As tears were trickling down my face, I thought, well, I removed my belt. I did this without him ever noticing. When I removed my belt, I choked him from behind. The driver lost control of the car and it started swerving on the road, left and right in a zigzag. It was swerving on the road. Well, I had to make a quick jump and I opened the door and I jumped out of that moving car. I landed so hard on the road. I was hurt, but I got up and I ran as fast as my legs could carry me, and I hid in the bushes in a tree. I had bruises, but this was the least of my concerns. I had to find a police station very fast so that I can narrate my ordeal to them. The nearest police station was about 100 kilometers away, so getting there was going to be a problem. I emerged myself and I came out of my hiding place as the journey had to continue. An hour, unfortunately, had passed since I wanted to ensure that the maggoted driver had not followed me. As I emerged from my hiding place, I saw a crowd gathering on the car. There was an accident. I heard them talking, and the driver had died on the spot. It is said that he lost control of the car and he died. Good riddance, I thought to myself. He who lives by the sword will die by the sword. No more sacrificing innocent souls. I thought, I am a survivor. That is the end of my story. Dear listeners, right there was a message that was forwarded to one of our admins by one lady who is living in the United Kingdom. This story happened to her when she was still in Zim. Strange things do happen in this world.